What's up, guys? It's Talon. Today we're going to be coaching a Varus and Ezreal player, coaching them specifically a lot about kind of ability usage in lane, understanding that type of thing, how to play poke champions, because both these champions are really poke-focused champions. And then just talking about, a lot of the basics, like keeping track of enemy spells and cooldowns, understanding who's the most important, how to play team fights, all that type of thing. So if you're interested, in the video, stick around and watch the rest of the video. If you're interested in getting coached yourself by a rank 5 sovereign autofill player like myself, just DM me on Discord, Talon1169, or through the link in the description to my Discord server. But without further ado, let's get right into the video.
Hey man, so would you like me to give you some information about my experience, or
Yeah,
just go ahead and do the review? Yeah, okay. So I played League for about 10 years. Then I stopped playing League. I hopped on Wild Rift. I enjoy Wild Rift a bit more.
Yeah.
And I'm an ADC main. I play mainly ADC and support. And right now I'm trying to get into Masters. I was once into Masters, but that was like a few seasons ago, and I didn't try hard. It's hard to just get back into Masters.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I can get higher up. Yeah, played some ARAMs. Now, I'm struggling with. I mean, you can just tell by the replay with what I'm struggling with. I think I have pretty good game sense, pretty good knowledge. Right now, we're at Diamond 2. I'm one game from Diamond 1. This is a Varus game. I'm a big fanboy of your Varus. I really like Varus. I play him a lot.
Yeah.
So most of the stuff I know about the champion and the way I play it is directly copied from you. So yeah.
First small thing, by the way, don't go Blade of the Rune King with this build ever, because it's like it doesn't really work with what you're doing. I know they're like Heartsteel champs, and so I'm assuming the thought process was just they have a bunch of health later on in the game. But like the problem is, it just doesn't really work very well with the rest of the goal of the build, which is like more just poke focused. And if you want damage to melt the tanks, you have Mortal Reminder and Riftmaker, which is already like a lot more focused around your stacks, which is kind of where you want your damage to come from. Whereas the Blade of the Rune King damage that you're getting, like as your last item, is more focused on your auto attacks, so it doesn't really synergize very well. And it makes your damage versus like squishies way worse, so instead you just go something like Maulate just to survive better. Because they have like multiple champs with AP that would kind of be jumping on you potentially. So you'd go something like that, or you just go like anti-shield. I think that'd be pretty likely. That type of thing, such as the first thing to keep in mind.
Okay.
I mean, the first lane phase here obviously went pretty well, so I mean, I don't really have a problem with any of that, so that's good so far. But yeah, the build thing is just the first thing to keep in mind, but that's overall really it so far.
Okay. Noted.
We'll also go to the top right real quick and click the 3 little bars, and then where it says Fog of War, just make that the blue thing. Also, quick thing for your lane, the lane was pushing and you recalled when the wave was pushing. If you had just pushed this wave yourself, you wouldn't lose out on a couple minions that you lost out on. So typically, if you get a kill, you get an advantage in lane or whatever, and your minions are like, you have more minions than them, that means that your minions will kill theirs if you recall. So you'd rather not recall right away. You'd push the wave first, as long as you're not worried about anything like killing you. You had flash and cleanse up, so you'd be pretty safe, which is why it's totally fine. Say that you used your flash and your cleanse and you were 1 HP, then you might want to recall. But because you had that health. Also, your usage in lane of abilities is a little too much, where like your third ability is a useless ability in lane unless you have stacks on them. And you've used it multiple times just to get a little bit of poke onto them, but the poke is so minuscule that all you're doing is bleeding your mana, so you don't really have kill pressure on them, because you're just almost not going to have enough mana to kill them, or it's going to be really close. So only really use your first ability when they have no stacks on them, like for poke. And usually you're going to play it around your first strike, is kind of when you're going to really look for first ability poke, like you did there, like that's perfect. But then when you start using your third ability a lot, that's when your mana just depletes a bunch, and you'd rather just wait till you have stacks. Like even here, you did your third ability a bit too early, so you didn't get as much value out of stacks. So after you ulted them, you would rather auto attack 1 time then third ability, because then you're going to give it time to build up 1 stack from the ultimate, then you're going to get an auto attack stack. That's going to be more damage overall, and then they're going to get an additional stack from the ultimate onto them for you to then first ability after. Does that make sense?
Yep.
You're just trying
Totally.
to have a better cycle of your like passive, your second ability's passive in the early game. That's like the main thing so far. Still worked out because you know you still like made a good play overall, so still works out. But that like optimization is just gonna make a lot of like killing a lot easier, and you're gonna be better on mana because you saw how at the end of that you were like you didn't have enough mana for a single another ability. So luckily you killed them
Absolutely.
in time, but a lot of times we could have a little more mana and then be better. So.
I just saw that Ash was 4 and she didn't respect that I was 5.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. 100%. Like again, the overall play was great. It's just the optimization with the ability usage that'll be better. But apart from that, it was a good play. So, and here, I mean, I would have just kited back a little because it's a little scary into Volibear. But I don't mind. Like I would have kited more towards turret, is what I mean, rather than kiting up
Yeah.
here because this kind of traps you a little bit and going straight into Volibear. Even though you had him really low, you could saw how it was relatively close, and that's because that champion like will heal and shield, and it's really hard to actually kill them if they get onto you. So that's a smaller thing. Overall, though, I do think this lane phase is like being played a lot better than the average like player I'd watch at this point. So I think that's good.
Thanks, man.
But yeah, I think so far the main things to keep in mind are if you get a kill in the early game, that you want to push the wave. If it's pushing, you don't want to just
Shove
leave
it.
it. And then the second thing, again, is just the ability usage where you're playing a bit more around your stacks with your third ability. And yeah, those are the main things so far. So. I still have a bit of a cough, so I might be coughing at times.
Yeah,
But,
me too, man. I'm still recovering.
yeah. Seems like a lot of people have been sick lately. Overall,
Yeah.
at this point,
Yeah.
I just want you pushing the wave as quick as possible, so I want you to just go on the wave right away and just push, which is what you do, so that's good. And we should probably just look for a ward after on the objective, just try to possibly steal if they do start it. Like, that's the only thing, is to make sure that we're focused kind of on the objectives after this, which looks like, no, you do go for a plate, which I'd rather get the ward off first. I don't hate going for the plates. I don't think it's like an awful play, but the problem is now they have complete control over the objective. You have no vision of them, and you're just not really like in a position to help your team out if it's being contested. Turns out it's not, so like we're fine, but you have no way of specifically knowing that, and so that's just something to keep in mind, is like getting that vision. Usually you want to be pushing the wave about 20 to 10 seconds before the objective's going to spawn. Like you want to have control over your lane. Then you want to use that control to be able to rotate and pressure an objective, because even if like say your team goes Herald, a lot of times if you get a ward on there, you have a very high chance of just stealing the objective, you know, because they're not gonna like see you, and then you just use your W and your Q, and you do like 600 plus damage in the early game. So that's one thing that could have been important, but yeah, that's all.
Okay, and how about recall timing before the objective? I should go cash out so I'm strong for the fight, right?
Yeah. So notice you saw the wave, right? That you crashed on their turret around 4 minutes and 50 seconds, right?
Yep.
That wave is the one that you want to be on, because like you want to be fighting on that wave, right? So you get control. So typically you want to recall the wave before that wave, because then you're still going to have time to get back and get control over the lane, but you're also going to be spending your gold. So typically the wave right before that one, which is usually going to be around like 4 minutes. I would say just the typical like number you look for on the map is roughly 4 minutes to like 4 minutes 20-ish seconds that you're going to look to recall. But there's different situations. So like let's say that you're 200 gold from Essence Reaver early game. In that case, you're just gonna like push that wave, like you're gonna push the 445 wave, you know, you're just gonna push that, you're gonna recall. Even if you're slightly late because you're hitting a really good spike, you can, you know, be a bit more greedy for that. But in most cases, it would be, you know, the wave that I said before. So does that make sense?
Makes sense. Yep.
Yeah. And then overall, my goal here now would be to shift towards mid lane. You're relatively strong, your team is doing okay, but not great. And so I would push this wave really quick. I'll push the next wave immediately. And then I would go mid, even if my teammate's mid, because like that turret's low too, and you would have some time to be able to start rotating. So typically after the first objective, and usually like around more like this like 7 or 8 minute mark, is when I'm really just trying to shift towards mid. So instead of kind of staying here, notice how you have about 15 seconds where you're not doing anything, because they're just under their turret farming. And it's actually kind of ironic that we end up dying here.
I think
Obviously we
I
wouldn't
die
really...
here. Yeah.
Yeah, but like, you don't really want to be spending a lot of time just in these, like, just kind of staring at them as they're farming under the turret, because you're usually not going to be able to do that much. So what you would prefer is, even if you're not necessarily rotating straight towards mid, is to use that time that you push the wave to at least get vision, so that you can have some amount of, like, you know, understanding of the jungle's location or other things like that. In this case, it's possible you might have gotten caught anyway because volley was like right there, but a lot of times if you're able to get wards off right after pushing the objective, it's easier to not get caught by a thing like that volley bear ganking or something like that. And so again, what the hell was that Lux ult? What? But
Yeah, I think he griefed or something.
yeah, either way, the goal really for you right now is to get in the mid, and that's usually the goal of Varus in the mid game because you have really good poke. And so again, every time I'm kind of wanting you to push the wave that reaches the neutral point, so this current wave here, and then I want you going mid right away. So
Okay.
we'll see what you do.
So I should not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I should not go for their turret at all costs.
No, yeah, it's not the end of the world. Like here you saw kill angle, so like now that you saw the kill angle, I'm fine with you, you know, going for it and taking it. No problem with that. But like, the goal is not just get this turret at all costs, then go mid. A lot of times, even if you just lose your turret, it's kind of nice because now you don't have to like worry as much about getting the wave right away because you know you have a bit longer until it'll die to your turret because it can go a bit further. So like even there, you could just, again, you get the neutral wave, like the wave that reaches like the middle point of your lane, and then if you push that one as soon as it reaches, you have like a 20 or 30-second window to do whatever you want. And a lot of times what ends up happening is like, okay, now you go mid, maybe you get a kill, you get vision, you get something valuable, and then you use the fact that maybe you got a kill because you rotated to then later on take that bot turret because now you have a numbers advantage. So like, taking those turrets right away isn't the end of the world. Now, it's going to depend on the situation, to be clear. Don't just do this every game. Like, if you see an angle to kill them, go for the angle to kill them and then take the turret anyway, right? Or if you know, your jungle's pathing towards you, you know you can set up a gank, then, you know, stay there, right? So there's going to be different situations where you're going to want to stay in lane. But as, like, the most common thing you're going to want to do in the mid game, you're going to want to be, like, kind of pushing the wave as quick as possible so you have some time to, you know, create a numbers advantage in the mid lane or to get vision or other things like that. And again, I think you played this fight pretty well so far overall. I don't really have an issue with that. I guess you can't, yeah, you can't really do much here. That's the point. So yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, you got a kill and your teammate's pushing topside and you already had dragon. So I mean, we're in a good spot as the game as a whole.
At this point, I'm the only one on my team that's actually doing well because like they were actually going for surrender votes and stuff.
Yeah, people get tilted weirdly. I like it. They'll surrender. I literally had a game where we were like even gold and my team surrendered. It's really strange, but I mean, like the game as a whole. Like, what's the scoreboard? You want to pull up the scoreboard? And, it's just the bottom
how can I do that?
The bottom middle, like.
Oh yeah, this one. Yep.
Yeah, so we can kind of see the gold overall. So like, yeah, we're really strong right now. And yeah, they have multiple Heartsteel jams, which is why I like Riftmaker. This might even be one of the few games you could go Riftmaker third if you wanted. I'm totally, like, I would probably still be going at fourth, but it's like it's fine because of how tanky they are to do that.
Yeah, is it a mistake that I went Mortal second?
No. Mortal second's the best option here. Yeah, because
okay.
I mean, like the hard part about Mortal second is that not having Edge of Night second means that Ahri and Ashe are very, like, you know, easy to kill you, but you have Cleanse, and Mortal would be more damage, so I'm fine with it. Because their armor's probably over 100 at least on 2 champions, which is 33% 10. And here you should have taken the long way, but that's kind of obvious, so we don't need to talk too much about that, right? But either way, the math on it, they'd probably be 1 to 150 armor by that point, which is anywhere from like 33 to 50, you know, flat pen from Mortal, which is over double what you would be getting from any other item. So it's totally fine whenever there's a lot of tanks to go Mortal second, but usually when I'm ahead, I like Edge of Night second because it's a bit easier to not die and everything, right? It gives you the better survivability. And so now you don't have Edge of Night by third item because you wanted the anti-shield, which is fair because they have gargoyles and stuff. But it's really,
yeah, I saw the gargoyles.
Yeah, but it's really hard because of the fact that having no Edge of Night makes it very easy to die. So like for me, I would go Edge of Night second and Mortal third and then Serpent's fourth. But like this build path is fine too. There's not always just one thing that's like fine. Like this is totally fine the way you did it as well. It's a bit more risky, but it's also, you know, potentially better to 1v9. So. And again, you could squeeze one more auto in here when you ult. So again, like a lot of times you're ulting, then you third ability right away. You could auto one more time before doing that. small
Okay.
thing, but the damage is sometimes going to matter. And then here again, notice how you started off with the third ability. The first thing is you can never even really walk at these tanks. Like when a tank is doing something like this, when they're walking at you, you can't take autos onto them. Like you just have to pretty much kite backwards,
Right.
let your team engage, and then maybe get autos off when you're in a lot of safety. You third ability without having stacks on them, which does no damage, so it doesn't really matter. And then it also makes you more susceptible because obviously, you know, you got a lot closer to them to do that. So that's just a thing to keep in mind, like with in the mechanical part of playing Varus. Just can't really kill tanks in general, like unless your team CCs or is in front or something. But
I think I was going for the slow, but I think it's like so meaningless that it doesn't even make a difference. I just die.
yeah, because you're slowing yourself more because you stand still to use the ability than like the amount
Yeah.
of slow that you would get. But yeah, I understand. Yeah, I would say it's pretty rare that I even do use the ability. Obviously, every once in a while, I'll use the ability for slow. Again, notice how you started with your third ability. Like, these types of things, it just doesn't do very much damage. And it's kind of, you know, you're kind of bleeding a lot more damage. Again, you've done 2 third abilities at this point without any stacks on them. Here, it's pretty hard to play. Like, when they just jump on you, honestly, I don't have a huge issue with that death. But that is one nice thing about Edge of Night, right? Like, you can't just instantly get stunned. Or something, but either way, I think the main issue is just when your teammates are going on people, you're not using the combo properly to kill tanks, and then you're just never gonna have enough damage to kill tanks if you don't get value out of your stacks. Because like your champion can melt people, can melt squishies without stacks. Like your first ability will do a bunch of damage and everything, but where your damage comes from is your stacks, especially when you're trying to kill tanks, and so you need to take a lot better advantage of that to kill these tanks in the fights. Again, I don't actually think like it would change the outcome of this, to be clear, because this fight, you know, was very losing either way. But that is still, again, something that we need to be doing a lot more often if we want to kind of be melting tanks and taking advantage of that. But yeah. It is pretty hard at this point since you guys are down a bunch, so I would say, again, to like reiterate, and again, we'll write out notes after, but the main points, obviously, again, playing around the stacks at all points in the game, the early game and the later parts of the game, like early game for mana usage, and then later game just for like actually getting max value onto tanks and everything, is a big thing. That's just in general, like keeping track of like your distance a bit better. Like a lot of times you're getting a lot closer, like even in this situation here, right? And some of the other situations where you went for your third ability or other things. So you're spacing, you're a bit too far forward a lot of times to kill these tanks. And you can play a bit more patient, play a bit further back a lot more times because you have a lot of range. And then just take advantage of the autos, you know, once the fight kind of breaks out. Because like if you try to auto and fight people at the very start of the fight, they have all their abilities, right? But like as the fight breaks out, it's like, okay, now a Volibear ultimate's gone, right? Now I can walk forward because he can't just ult onto me. Oh, they used their Zyra and their Ahri ultimate. Now there's no one who can really just, you know, randomly one-shot me out of nowhere. So like, in the early parts of the fight, you're usually just poking to start. You're just going to be spamming abilities probably without autos onto people. And then as the fight breaks out, unless you get an ultimate really early, but otherwise, you know, you're just going to probably just spam abilities to start, especially your first ability. And then like, as the fight breaks out and you see those key spells go out, that's when you start going forward for autos. Does that make sense?
Yep. I mean, while I'm watching the replay, I really see that their ability usage is not optimal. I mean, definitely.
Yeah, it is usually the ability, like when I've coached, Varus probably the champ. I mean, even here when you're wave clear, which is a smaller thing, but you third ability to start it, which does no damage, so then even your wave clear is slightly slower. Not as big of a deal, but yeah, like when I coach people, that is kind of like one of the main things when it comes to the ability usage, because most people, you know, it's pretty straightforward how to use Q, how to use ult and everything, but usually it's that stack, like that stacking that is really the issue. I mean, again, here, at this point, the game's kind of over, so you're just looking for a miracle, so I don't really mind, like, trying to see if you can steal or something, but at this point, you just have to leave, you know?
Your third ability does grievous wounds, right?
Yeah,
No?
it does. It does.
Okay.
I mean, you're building Mortal Reminder most times, so, like, it doesn't even matter at this point in the game, right? Because
It doesn't
Mortal
stack.
Reminder is just the item anyway. I don't know if it like stacks, to be honest with you, but even if it stacks, it's definitely diminishing returns because that's almost always how like percentage-based things work. So if it does stack, it's probably not like the full value. But I'd imagine
Not
that it
worth it.
doesn't stack because other Grievous Wounds things don't stack. So I doubt it does, but yeah, I don't actually like 100% know. But either way, like it's not super important once you have Mortal, especially to try to focus on using your third ability specifically for anti-heal. Usually the time that I'd actually get value from the anti-heal is like, say early game I'm laning a Soraka or something and I'm looking for an all-in and I get my third ability onto someone like who I'm trying to all-in, right? That's kind of the time where I'd actually maybe get value from it, but honestly the Grievous Wounds from it isn't something that I feel like I'm usually getting much out of. It's more of a pretty rare like thing that every once in a while can be neat or be useful. That was a nice steal. That's good for us. But yeah, I like again,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, Mumu was just he was a king here.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, like again, the last like 5 minutes, there's not really been much to learn from because it's kind of just been like you're down so much, you're down 2 inhibs that you're just looking for a miracle. And so sometimes you're gonna get caught when you look for that type of thing. And I don't really have an issue with that. So even though like you end up dying, you know, a couple times.
I think I'm still up in gold. Yeah, I mean, Volibear is the only one who's actually doing better than me.
Yeah, no, you're quite strong for sure. I think at this point, after your 4th item, you definitely should have built an enchant. Like probably QSS, right? Because
Okay.
what's up?
Yeah, I mean, I was like, okay, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I just didn't hear it. But yeah, the reason I'd want QSS because obviously RE Charm, Volibear stun, Ash stun, Dyra, like there's a lot of things. So even probably would have got QSS after 3rd item most likely. Typically that's when I'm gonna buy my enchant most of the time, unless there's like really no threat, or if I'm behind. But if I'm ahead like you were for most of the game, building that enchant after like 3rd item can save your life, and that's a lot more valuable most of the time. And like again, notice how you don't have Edge of Night still, so you're not even building Edge of Night, which
Yeah, I didn't. I ended up not getting it.
which is really, it's a really valuable item into champions with a single target ability like RE Charm, Ash Ultimate, like these types of things. It's really nice to have into, so I definitely recommend, I mean, most games. And again, when you're ahead as well, makes it a lot easier to not die, so it's just kind of something to keep in mind. But
I usually get it, but like here, like you pointed out, I got the Bork, which was not a great deal, but
yeah.
I usually get Edge of Night second.
So yeah, it makes sense. And you wanted the anti-shield, like I understand. I don't really think it's, again, the build thing, I don't think it's the main issue here. I think it's mostly a fine build, even if it's like slightly different than I would do. So I'm more just mentioning it, but it's not like the main thing that will really change the outcome of many games overall. Oh, and then yeah, I would say, I mean, like the biggest thing too is like the way to spread your lead. And I imagine, like, again, based on how I watch your lane phase, like it was overall solid. Varus is a good laner, so you're usually going to get a lead as well. And like understanding that rotation part that we kind of spoke about, like being able to push the wave and then rotate towards mid or rotate towards even sometimes topside or whatever, that's probably going to be one of the biggest ways to actually start snowballing your leads a lot more, because like, again, I assume you're getting a lot of leads and then probably getting decent value in the later parts of the game, but to really extend the lead and not just get outscaled, because Varus does get outscaled by most champs, like you're going to want to start taking more advantage of turrets. So like in another scenario, you might get that bot turret early on, and in that case, I'm going to want you to do the same thing, right, where you push your lane. But then after you push your lane right away, you can sometimes even take a quick recall and then immediately go topside and like play for that turret as well. Especially if the enemy like ADC is not a good pusher. Like let's say they're, I don't know, like Ashe, for example. Like Ashe isn't that good at pushing. So you're more okay with like giving that up because you kind of get that advantage where it's like you have the 20-second window where there's no wave, so they can't push right away. And then even if you're gone for 40 seconds, you're gonna probably have gotten top turret or gotten a killer or something. And also this is quite greedy. I think we don't know where pretty much everyone is.
It was greedy. I die here, and look at the play. I mean, what I did was I went for Zyra.
Yeah.
I think that was good. I mean,
yeah, I mean,
that was the
just
best
like the greed. We need to kind of understand like the state of the game that we're in for a play like this and like the risk reward. Like, I'm glad you got the trade, but you're the most valuable member of your team, so you cannot die. You just got the Baron, and 4 people were alive and you didn't see anyone on the map. So going for something like this when you don't know where pretty much everyone on the enemy team is definitely extremely risky. And Elder was spawning in 45 seconds, which means your death timer is longer than Elder's respawn timer, so you're dead for the most important objective in the game. So, I mean, again, that's a pretty straightforward thing. We all sometimes get greedy and whatever. But really, like, when you're going for a play, whether it's like you're going for a turret or something, a lot of times people will kind of like go for the turret and sort of just hope that someone's not there, even if they don't actually have the information. And that's kind of what was happening there. It's like you
exactly.
kind of knew there was a chance, but you were trying to
Yeah,
like squeeze it and then just get out right after. And you can do that in some scenarios, but the times that you can't do that are when something really important is happening soon. Also here, I would just be sitting over the wall and looking for a steal. I wouldn't even show myself. So that's just a small thing as well. Like the only thing that matters is the objective here. So I guess we get it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. That's just what I'd be preferring because you have a really good smite, so you'd be able to probably get it. But like going back to the scenario, when you are looking for that type of play where you're trying to greet a turret or something, even though you know there's a chance of you dying because the enemy are alive or whatever, or you don't know where they are, that's okay to greed if there's not something super important. So if there's no objective that's spawning soon, or you have a chance of getting an inhib, and if you die, you know, again, there's no objective, there's nothing you're really going to lose, that's fine. But doing it right before Elder or something, when you have the Baron, that's when it's not really going to make sense. And you also died for a tier 2 tower, it wasn't like an inhib, right? So it's like, the risk reward in that kind of case is just not very large, so that's something to keep in mind.
makes sense. Yep.
But do we lose or win, right? Do we win?
We win. Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say, like, there's no way we lose, right? Because do you have any questions about this game or like any other specific?
Well, honestly, I have like a few questions. Now, first one was like, do you see the boots enchant I got? Like,
Yeah, I
the
would never
green
do
one.
that. I would do QSS every time in this
Yeah.
game.
Okay. Okay. Because like actually the reason I won the Drake fight with the volley when he went for me was because of that enchant.
You could just
But
QSS, it's the same effect pretty much. I mean, obviously he doesn't get knocked back, so like he can catch you slightly more, but like I don't think it really changes that. I know like the fight you're talking about. USS probably
yeah.
saves it, and even if hypothetically, let's just say it doesn't, right, and it turns out that that was what saved our life, well, this thing is way less valuable into every other champion on the enemy team. It only works in a volley. Whereas if you
Yeah,
get
that's
Ash
right.
Arrowed, you get Ari Charmed, you get hit by any of these ranged champs, there's nothing you can do, but you can QSS all of their abilities. So
Yeah, so it gets a lot more value,
yeah,
right? And one more thing was like the boots. I usually always go for the armor pen ones,
yeah.
but I was wondering if when they have like volley and Mundo in this case, and usually when they have like a large set of tanks that are actually really beefy, is it worth going the lifesteal ones, like the
No,
vamp ones?
never.
No.
Like the
Okay.
reason is because even when you're into tanks, a lot of your job as like this build, especially in the early game, is to poke out and kill squishies anyways, because your like tank killing comes from like the mortal and the riftmaker later on, but your early build is really focused around killing squishies, and it makes sense because you're laning in ADC, right? You're laning like a squishier champion, and then even like they still have Ari, Zyra, Ashe, right? That's a lot of squishy champs. And
Yeah.
the extra pen in the early game is way more valuable than the lifesteal boots ever will be, because you're not really auto attacking that much and your autos don't do that much, so you don't get that much value from the lifesteal anyway. So yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed that once I get the base with the boots, and when I go back to lane, like it's a small power spike because
Yeah.
the Q starts hitting real hard. I mean,
Yeah, definitely.
and one last thing was when I was like when we were playing lane bot side, I what I usually do is I don't look for poke with the Q unless I can hit a champion and the creep as well. I
Yeah.
mean, what I tend to do is like I try to hit as much creep as I can with the Q so that we have the minion advantage. Is that something right, or is that
Yeah, I
something
mean
that
that's actually that's like I was coaching Varus probably a week ago, and that was like a specific thing that I told them. because they had the same issue with the third ability usage, but they also with their first ability wouldn't get very much value from it, and so they were like really running out of mana. So no, 100% getting the push with it as well is like extremely important, and it's a big reason you're able to like win that lane is because you have the prio and you got that level 5 before they got level 5, right? And that's because it's really easy to get the prio. So 100% that's how you should utilize the ability. Obviously there's like cases where once you start getting them lower, then you can start using your first ability just for poke, because like now you already have control. They're going to back off anyway because they're low. So it's kind of in the early game, or like the early part of the lane before anyone has a big advantage, that you're really doing that. And then, you know, as the lane progresses, you're more okay with using your first ability just for poke if they're already pretty low, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I've noticed that as soon as you get Essence Reaver, if it's still laning, they usually they don't realize how much damage your second and your first does with the Essence Reaver.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just sit like at half HP or like 1/3 HP on their turret, and they think they're safe, and they just die to a random Q,
Yeah,
which is
100%.
like okay. So I got one more replay here. It's again from today.
Yep.
It's an Ezreal game.
All right.
And we can check that. It's a loss. I was still the SVP, but I'm not sure. I felt like I could do more.
Yeah.
Like I have an issue with playing a lot different champions, a lot of different champions in general, and that's one of the things that I'm trying to sort out, because I should narrow my champion pool. I think because
Yeah.
playing a bunch of random champions doesn't actually give me the results I would like to have.
Yeah, I mean, for ADC, I mean, if you play, if it Varus and Ezreal, because those are the ones you showed me, if those are the ones you play, I mean, there's never really a
Mostly,
case.
yeah.
There's never really a case where that's bad. Like Varus can play with every. I mean, I would say the only times that Varus Ezreal is kind of rough is if you have a Lulu or Emilio, because those are both like auto attack buffing kind of supports, and obviously these champs aren't really that auto attack based, so those are really the only two supports I could think of not wanting to play these champions with. But you still can play Varus with that. It's just like slightly worse. Main thing here is just that you kind of went too much for autos in this lane early. If we think about like the strength, and I mean you have a Lysandra, kind of unfortunate, right? But like
Yeah, I mean,
you could have just kind of sat back and let them push into you a bit harder and sort of just queued for like just for last hits. You're not really going to get much control in this lane. Their lane is very much like auto attack focused, like they get on top of you and they're just like going to completely burst you down. Your lane's a lot more poke focused, and so you were going a bit too much like for kind of like autos in the early lane to get the prio. You just can't really get prio in a matchup like this, so that's something to keep in mind. And then also you did go for 1Q on them early on when the wave was like completely there, and going for a Q early on when a wave is completely there, it's going to be really hard to get much value from most of the time, and then it makes them able to just push on you a lot easier. Like again here, you went for a Q on and second Q in a row, and so you're kind of wasting all your mana and you're not using it to farm third Q. Like you saw how 3 Qs, you did not use any of those on the minions. And when you have the advantage, like when you have the lane pushing and you have prio, that's good. I want you using your first ability to poke. But when you don't have the minions cleared, you have to kind of just farm and focus a lot more on that. Like notice your ability usage. Again, you're 0 mana, and that's because again you used your second ability on them there. You used a ton of your first abilities for poke, and you had no control. And so you want to be using your abilities in the early game initially to clear the wave, and then once the wave is cleared, you can then start poking them, because Ezreal's poke is really bad through waves because it gets blocked, you know, whatever, so it's very hard. So you need to play a lot more around, you know, pushing the wave first, and also play more around your passive. Like use your first ability on the wave only frequently enough to keep your passive up, and then you take a trade when your passive is like 3 or 4 stacks and you have that attack speed bonus, and then you like that's when you find the actual angles. So like you see how right now you have your stack, that's why you want to go in like you did here, and like this is perfect because you're playing around, and you might even you end up blowing this flash, right? And like that's why that happened, and maybe that was intentional, but like I don't know if it's intentional that you were trading that with your passive, but that's the reason you win that. Say you didn't have your passive up, you're just going to lose that trade really hard, which is why like it's so important to play around. So And then again, because we don't have the wave pushing, I mean, your teammate went in, so it's a little harder, but like that's why we don't have the level up, and then that's why it's like harder to poke through them and everything. So yeah, just the first thing for the lane in the early game here is just understanding like you need to be pushing that wave and playing around your passive a lot more. And also level 1, sometimes it's fine to give up a bit of control when your support's kind of not playing well, because again, obviously your support was like, you know, staggering behind and it made it hard for you to really walk up. And so you could have just kind of, you know, sat back a bit and sort of just first ability, but those are the main things. You end up still getting like in a fine spot with the lane. Like there's not really too many issues. Also, personally, I prefer Empowerment, but like Conquer is fine. A lot of people do prefer Conquer, but for me, like Empowerment lane phase is a lot stronger and allows you to play a lot around like all-in angles with your passive, and I really like having the early game strength there. But
Yeah, I mean, I usually take Empowerment in a lot of lanes, but here I was thinking like they have a volley, and I'm really not gonna win with Alessandra against a Nami Lucian. Like that's not gonna happen unless they don't play the game at all.
the way you would be
And
winning
maybe
would be an all-in angle, like with Lissandra, which would be kind of playing around jungle gank and then like, you know, Lissandra all-in, whatever. And Empowerment's still good there. I understand thought process though with like the better scaling from Conqueror. I don't think it, again, I don't really have like a actual problem. It's more similar to the last build in the game, just something I'm mentioning because it's what I'd prefer, but honestly, I'm totally fine with this choice as well. And there's not much you can do here.
yeah, I saw the dive. I was like, I should back off, and he just sat there like.
You know, I mean, you're definitely getting like, there's the mistakes we spoke about, but you're also getting griefed by your support for sure. So I mean, that makes it a lot
Yeah, I
harder.
mean, we
That is
actually
just
lost
part
the
of
game,
ADC,
and
unfortunately.
yeah, I mean, and like going for solo queue as a bot laner, it's like sometimes it's really demoralizing, you know. It's
Yeah, it's, I mean, I hate it. Like, it's the only role that I actually like don't enjoy playing in solo queue. Like, I only enjoy ADC when I'm with other people. Varus is the one champion that I don't care. Like, I can play Varus in solo queue because I play this champ so much, and he's like probably just the best solo queue ADC. The reason
he's
is
got such a strong lane, yeah.
yeah, I mean, one, the lane phase, so it's like you're gonna win a lot of lanes anyway, and then two, you have the range, so like you don't really have to rely on peel or other things because you have such long range, so like if you position well, you're not really gonna get caught or whatever. Ezreal's kind of similar. Like Ezreal is really good on his own, but weaker lane overall and like a little harder to get value from. A little more reliant on team, but both Ezreal and Varus are like definitely champions that are more solo queue focused compared to other ones. Ezreal is pretty hard to get as much value out of though. Like I would say based on what I'm watching as well, just like skill wise, Varus is probably the champion that you're gonna win more often on. Most likely. I think you're fine on Ezreal as well, and I think it's a good champion to have, and it plays kind of similar to Varus, but like to me, if you're really looking to just purely climb, Varus is probably the one to spam the most. But yeah.
I used to play a lot of Caitlyn as well, but right now she's not very good, so I don't even play her at all.
I think Caitlyn's pretty good right now, but I mean,
Okay.
I mean, if you're looking to play Caitlyn, and again, if you say you just don't want to, that's cool. These champs are fine. But like, the one nice thing about Caitlyn is she works really well with Lulu Emilio, and those are kind of the champs we mentioned are, you know, bad with the two champions who are playing. So if you see a Lulu or Emilio, that might be an angle to want to Caitlyn, but again, if you prefer just two champions, that's totally fine as well.
What do you think is the optimal like number of champions that one should go for? Like 2 or 3 champions at most?
Yeah, 2 or 3 to me is just like the number I typically tell people. Some people want a one trick, and then it's like I'm fine with one tricking, right? So I would say 1 to 3. To me, duo lane is slightly more important to have more than one champion, unless your champion works with everything, because like you do want to pick a little bit based on who your support is. So I like, yeah, I kind of like having 2 or 3 champions. For me right now, it's like Varus and Tristana, for example. And other times it was Varus, Corki, Varus, Ashe. So I typically always had the most success with like going with 2 to 3, yeah. But anything more than that, it gets pretty hard. And also like when I say 2 to 3, again, I would recommend there's one that it's like you're picking most of the time. And then it's like the other ones are, you see certain angles. So it's like if you see a Karma, that's amazing with Varus, or with Ezreal rather. It's good with Varus actually too. So like the thing is, there's a lot of overlap with what works well with Varus and Ezreal. But like, or you see again the Lulu or the Emilio, that's like, okay, maybe then I'll go Caitlyn. So it's kind of, that's how I typically go about the champion pool. That makes sense?
Yep. I could go show you my champions, like the how many games I got and what win rate, and you can just based on that, if you could share your knowledge and let me know which ones do you think I should focus on. I
Yeah.
mean, mainly the Varus is going to be for sure probably the one that I'm going to play the most,
Yeah.
but I'm also gonna want to have like two more picks in the pocket for
Yeah. Yeah.
different cases.
Gotcha. Yeah, I wasn't honestly paying that much attention to the last like minute of the game, so I don't.
Yeah, I mean nothing happened.
Yeah,
Nothing
I didn't
happened.
think anything's. But yeah.
Like they're just killing us around the map, and my
Yeah.
team is griefing.
And at this point, I would say like I would after I push mid, I would probably go top side again to like get that wave if I have time. Because again, like the one thing I think is important as ADC is understanding how to like create a lot of gold. And something I'll see specifically like Jackie do a lot. I don't know if you know who Jackie is, but
Yep. Yep.
but yeah, like something I'll see him do more than pretty much any other ADC is like when he is losing, he'll really take advantage of sides. So like here again, this is why I would go top right now, right? You see that wave, that's just some free gold we can squeeze. And when the game's not looking the best, like it's not that bad, the gold's even, but like it's not looking great. Squeezing as much gold as possible is really important as an ADC because you really want to be getting to like that certain kind of spike. Like for example, you want Iceborne before this next dragon. Like that's really important for you, right? So it's like I'm really trying to squeeze that gold. And so you do this now, right? And so let's just think about
But it's too late.
if you did it, yeah, like a wave earlier, right, before you recalled, then you would get to spend that gold as well. And then you'd be in mid right now, which then would allow you to get another wave. So basically the fact that you recalled and then now we go afterwards means that, yeah, now you're later to set up for the objective, so your team ends up dying, which is their fault for dying, but like again in hindsight we could have been there. But then also it means that you lose out on a wave here because like then this wave in mid, part of it already died and you're just there a bit like later, and then you also haven't gotten a recall off for like spending this additional gold. And so that's kind of like just that small kind of pacing thing that'll be really important. And then what I was saying is like Jackie in a situation like this, he would still be topside and he would be trying to get that tier 2 most of the time. Like at least it's pretty often. I think it's fine for you to fight here because you're like relatively strong, but like because of the fact that you haven't hit your second item, oftentimes when he's behind, he would be doing something like that. He'd go for a tier 2 if he gets his support. Now again, you didn't get your support to go there because, you know, he just didn't follow. And so I'm fine with you just fighting. But that's just like something to keep in mind is like a play you can often make. And then again, I think you could have played a bit more around having your passive stack before instantly Eing forward. Like I think your E's in general are a bit too aggressive. Like there's multiple times you've kind of E forward onto tanks. And then it's just like now we have nothing really to get in. So it's kind of the same as if we think about your Varus gameplay where you would go for autos a bit earlier. And with Ezreal, it's kind of similar with your third abilities forward. So keep in mind again, you kind of want to, especially with these poke champions, play more around getting the poke for the early fights, or the start of the fight. And then as the fight breaks out, then you can start going forward because these abilities are going to be out. So I also want you to think about the key abilities every fight. So like if you look at this one, right, obviously Zed ultimate and Volibear ultimate, those are probably the two most dangerous things. Like other things could kill you, but realistically those are the two where it's like I really need to make sure those things are kind of gone before I go forward. And so you'd really be playing for poke mostly until you see those things go. Or, you know, if you had stasis, right, or you know that you can survive later as the fight breaks out. So maybe like they have already volley ulted, but they haven't yet Zed ulted. You might still be able to go forward if you know that you're not going to take damage from other things because you do have that Iceborne like armor and everything. So you're not probably going to get one shot by it. But if you don't have exhaust up or you don't have, you know, like someone else is kind of damaging you at the same time, then you're just going to die to it. So keeping in mind those key spells and sort of waiting those out is going to be more valuable than going forward so early. Because you also went forward when only like one of your teammates was really forward. And so you kind of also have to keep in mind like your teammate's location as well. But yeah.
Yep. So play it a bit more patiently, like wait out, poke, and not commit it and be aggressive that early.
Yeah,
That's
and
what I get.
what I want to make sure is like understood is the reasoning for playing it safe is because they have spells that could threaten you. And so sometimes you can start off a fight playing really aggressive if you don't see like any real danger. So if it's just like a comp where either you're really ahead and they don't really have anyone who can kill you, or just like maybe their comp is just not very aggressive or very good at actually killing you, in that case you can be aggressive a lot quicker because you know like I have my third ability if anything goes wrong, or I have my flash up. So like you also have to keep in mind like what spells you have up and what the enemy kind of have to actually kill you, more so than it just being a blanket statement of always play patient, right? That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Just like think about what are the biggest threats on the team to
Yeah,
me. Once they commit with their like most dangerous cooldowns,
yeah.
then I
Then you
can
go for
just
it. Yeah,
yep, yep. And I was gonna ask about the Trinity Iceborne thing.
yeah.
That's I went Iceborne here because of Zed, Lucian, and Volibear, obviously, because like I was like I should cut them out because they're gonna just pop me open if anything.
Yeah. I mean, Iceborne versus Trinity, I'm pretty fine anytime there's an AD assassin going Iceborne. So like you see Zed,
Yep,
you want to go it.
yep.
Um, sorry, one sec. But yeah, I mean, this game is like one where, because at the start I was thinking, like I saw that you go Iceborne and I was thinking, do we need it? Because it's like, this is like a debatable situation where it's like they have some AP, because Volley does a bit of AP as well, and they only have
Hmm.
one like really big AD threat. So in a case like this, you could go either, and I'm fine with it because obviously Trinity more damage, but the Iceborne's gonna make it a lot easier to survive. Um, and then like let's say they add any additional like AD champion that also jump on you, then I'd like definitely go it. But yeah, overall, anytime that there's like a big threat that's an AD champion, I'm totally fine with you going for it. But if you also want to be greedy, like most of the time, that's fine as well. So like these types of build things are really fine either way.
I mean, I also saw Lucian going two lethality items, and he was pretty aggressive. He like at fights he was trying to go onto me, regardless of
Yeah, yeah, that's
Akali and.
totally fair for sure. I didn't notice
I
he's
mean,
going
there's
two lethality. What's he going? What's the build?
yeah, he's got like
Oh yeah, that's a weird build.
yeah. I was like, what's this build? But he actually it worked out for him. I mean, he got fed all of a sudden in lane. He wasn't that strong, but
Yeah,
I mean, nothing really happens much in this game. I mean, we try our best, we lose poorly. Like I don't even I don't know why they're fighting here. A lot
yeah,
of these games when the enemy gets an objective and like for example Nash and they're just pushing us and all we have to do is just defend our turrets and clear the creeps and my team just goes in and ends and they just die and we
yeah.
lose.
I mean, I would say a lot of like the later parts of the game, there wasn't much you could have done. Like this isn't the easiest game to play Ezreal in, and there was like a lot of negative things that happened from your teammates' perspective, or like what they did wrong. I would just say like again, I don't think that, like, I don't even think if I go into this game, I would probably still lose it, like myself even. But like, and that's just sometimes what happens. Not every game's winnable. Um, I would just say the main things from this game are more like the early game understanding. You can play
Yeah.
around your passive more in the early game, like to make these kind of trades and these all-in angles, and understanding like if you're in a bad matchup that you need to kind of save your first ability and your mana just to farm, and just kind of survive through the early lane rather than kind of going like, you know, running out of mana because we go for a lot of poke, especially again if they have healing, you know, like with Nami, so it's also
Yep.
less valuable there. So like that early game is like kind of the main thing, understanding again also that you don't really want to go for the poke as much until you control the wave and you have it pushing, because Ezreal's poke's really hard to get off, like on an
Hmm.
initial wave. That's like kind of the big thing, and then the keeping track of spells for fights, and timing our aggression based on that. I'd say those are the two main things to really learn from this game. I would say the rest is pretty hard.
Yeah, I mean, one thing was also that Lissandra, I don't have chat because I have a habit when I go into games because people tend to be really negative.
Yeah, I
All I
mute
do is
chat
just
too.
mute.
It's good. Yeah.
Yep. I just mute him and just play my best. And like, if somebody does something good, I'm just like, well played mid, well played jungle,
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
and just. But like, he just went split like a couple of fights and a couple of objective contests. He just went split pushing waves, like side laning. Look at him right now, what he's doing. Like they have
yeah,
Elder. I mean, they have Nash. We have Nash up, and he's like, and we have to defend our base, and he did this the whole game, and there's nothing I can do about it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, this is definitely a pretty unwinnable one. It is what it is.
But like, maybe I can just cut it. Like, there's nothing else that happens. They
Yeah, yeah.
just run us over, and
That's fine. You can
okay,
go. You wanted to show your like champions, and then we'll just
champions.
all,
Yep,
and then I'll share my screen and I'll write notes out, and I'll send you those notes, and then yeah.
beautiful. Now let's go there. Let's go here, and we got level 12 dragon. Okay, so we got
You should click
this.
first. Click on the top the like
This
leaderboard
one.
looking thing. Yeah, and then click the
Yep.
season 16. Because I don't care about your win rate overall as much as I care about season, you know? So like Varus,
Yep.
is doing well, Kaisa and Sivir. You can scroll down. Yeah, I mean, so overall, win rates on them are mostly like similar. I would say the main thing is between Kaisa and Sivir, should probably choose one of those two. And play those when you get like the buffing enchanters, like Yumi, Melio, Lulu type of thing, because
Yep.
those are the champs that don't work super well with Varus. And then I would say most other cases you can lock in Varus. Ezreal, if you want to keep playing Ezreal, is good, but also Ezreal is very similar to Varus. So in most situations, unless Varus is banned, I don't see a super like needed reason to go for Ezreal most of the time. So I would say like to
Okay.
me, Varus and then Kaisa slash Sivir, one of those two is like would be like the main ones. And then when you see maybe an angle for something else, either you just also play Kaisa and like you could play Kaisa and Sivir, right? It could be both if you prefer. But they're pretty similar as well, kind of similar
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
how Varus and
They're
Ezreal are.
kind of.
So that's what I would say overall.
Okay, and I mean, which one do you think is like better to commit currently this season to, like Kaiser or Sivir? Because both of them are pretty decent. Like I like them both.
I mean,
Um,
I think Sivir is way easier to get value out of. Like Kaisa is technically a little stronger, but she's way harder to execute on. And we can kind of see, I mean, your win rate is higher. It's a smaller sample size, but like your gold per minute's also a bit higher on it, which means you're getting more gold. Like your stats overall look better. To me, Sivir is easier to execute on. I think Sivir is kind of busted. Like I think Sivir is way more underrated. Kai'Sa's,
yeah,
everyone knows is strong, but Sivir is pretty underrated. I would say overall Sivir, but like if you choose Kai'Sa because you have more fun with it or whatever reason, that's a totally fine one too.
I mean Sivir is pretty decent because I usually when I see my team going, like for example something like Olaf jungle or Darius top or something, and just the ultimate gives so much value, like so much
Yeah,
utility for them, and it's a no-brainer there. And also like the wave clear is it's insane. I mean, uh, it's been there's been games where we just get pushed into
yeah,
like inhib turrets, and then just because of the wave clear we somehow managed to come back and we turn around the game because we have Sivir.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, yeah, I think that makes sense as a choice. Um, then if you don't have other specific questions, I'm gonna share my screen with you right now, and then I'm gonna write
Yeah,
notes
I
up.
mean, one last question would
Yeah,
be, I mean, if I settle for Varus and Sivir, for example, and then any suggestions on a third champion, something that doesn't fulfill their role exactly, like we like Varus and Ezreal, obviously they're poke champions. Sivir is and Kaisa are like auto attack based.
yeah. I
Anything
mean, if
else that
I'm
you?
thinking of like a champ that I would add, if I needed, and I would say those two are like you don't necessarily need to, but if you did want to, I would say an early game kind of lane bully makes sense to me. And you already have a decently long range champ, and like I mean, Sivir's not like long range, but like still kind of sort of a front to back champion, and Varus pretty long range. So like to me, Lucian is really good, like kind of all in potential. So if you have certain champs where you're like, I just want to play to like stomp the lane and kind of all in people, I mean, Lucian makes sense. I think Caitlyn's fine too as a different type of lane bully, or
Yep.
Misfortune as well. I would say probably Lucian slash Misfortune. Lucian fits a bit better with enchanters, and Misfortune does a bit better with like engaged champions. So if you like picking Sivir with enchanters, then Misfortune's going to be nice. If you see like you have a Leona, you have a Nautilus, you have something like that. But both Lucian and Misfortune, when I think about the other supports that you would play with, it's like Lucian, if you're going to play him with enchanters, you'd probably play Sivir with enchanters anyway. Misfortune, if you're going to play with tanks, I'm pretty happy to play Varus with tanks. But
Yep.
like as like a third thing where it really is just like your third option if one of those two are picked or banned, and then like you have a case for them, I would say yeah, Lucian or Misfortune most likely.
I usually when I play Lucian and Misfortune, I do pretty well in the lane, and then I have just huge trouble closing out the game. Like I would just get fed in lane and then not be able to capitalize on that lead or something. That's
Yeah,
what
and the
usually
biggest
happens.
way to capitalize on that lead is going to be utilizing the thing we spoke about, which is you get your turret, you get the advantage in lane, and then you start pushing and taking advantage of being able to rotate around the map more often. Whereas I'd imagine a lot of times you're getting those leads and you're spending a bit more time in your lane before then like going towards mid, and you're probably also kind of sticking in mid a bit more than you're ever trying to play for those like the opposite, like the Baron lane turret later on. I would say that's one
Mhm.
of the main things that you could do. But if you also just feel like playing a later game champion works better for you, then you could still play something like Kaisa as your third option, and that'd be fine as well.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, well that'll be it for my questions. I
Okay,
mean,
then yeah,
yeah.
I'm gonna share my screen real quick, and we'll write notes in.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Let me just drop that screen share right there.
Yeah, let me know when you see my screen.
Yes, I see it.
Okay, cool. So we'll just go back through the start of like the first game, and then just kind of think about the things we spoke about. If you remember anything specific, or you have questions about how I worded it, or you want, anything, just stop me. But yeah, so first thing for the Varus game was just like Varus ability usage, like Varus third ability usage especially. Just like play more around second ability passive rather than spamming third ability with no stacks. So like that's the first main thing, just for like mana and everything. Your early game as a whole on Varus was pretty good, like the way you approached the lane and played around prio and everything. So I don't really have a huge issue with much of the early game, but then again, it's the thing where it's like after having an advantage in lane, or after having a lead in lane, push wave quickly, whatever.
There,
Then
there's
look
one.
to roam. Yeah.
There's one question that comes to mind when you mentioned the second ability. Uh, sometimes I have a hard time determining when I should use the active part, like the
Okay.
additional damage on hit and the arrow when I should empower the arrow. Obviously, when they're low health, but also are there other use cases for that? And is there a specific time when you should just pop the second ability active and like go for auto attacks?
Yeah, so the auto attacks from it are really just a bonus. So like let's say a tank goes on top of you, or like is really, you can pop your second ability a little early to get the auto attack bonus, and then you're gonna have enough time to get your first ability on them after, right? But like that's more of a luxury. That's not really something that you need to specifically worry about. It's just like, oh, this guy's on top of me, I'll just W because it's up, and then it'll do more damage. But that's not something you're typically thinking about. So the other times that like you're really using it is pretty much just either you have stacks on them or they're low. It's just like those are really the two options. Because obviously if you have stacks on them, then you're gonna get way more value for popping them. And it's gonna be a bunch of poke. And then if they're low, obviously it's for the execute. The only other kind of time I sometimes use it is if I'm really fed, I'm in a team fight and they're like, they have a squishy champion who's maybe full health, and I know that they'll get like half health from one first ability if I use my second ability. I might use it for poke, because then it might come up a second time for the fight. But that's like pretty rare, so I'm not going to specifically write that down, but just keep in mind that's the only other time where like maybe you'd use it, but usually it's just going to be the two things we described, with like either having stacks or when they're low. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I've also done it myself a few times. Like if I'm ahead and I just see that they have an open squishy, and I would just pop the W to just get a better poke in or something.
Yeah, yeah. So then next thing, in fights, like just in team fights, or just in general, play more again around W passive. So it's a similar thing, where we use an auto in between abilities more often. So like, for example, there were many times where you ulted, and then as soon as your ult went off, you immediately third ability. But that doesn't allow enough time for the stacks to build up from the ultimate, which is why you want to squeeze an auto attack, right? You would be alt, auto, third ability. And then you start walking away, you click your W, and then you're going to first ability, because then two more stacks will build up on them from the ultimate. Does that make sense? Like how that combo is going to be
Yep.
good? Yeah. So
Yep.
that's something to keep in mind. Then in fights, start off poking people and only go for autos once the abilities are gone from the enemy. We spoke about this in general, but yeah, just keep that in mind. In general, I think of what else we spoke about. There's that kind of situation late in the game where you got greedy and then died for Elder. So can be more greedy for turrets and golds if no objective up, or no objective like coming up. But when objectives are up soon, be a bit more cautious because your life just matters a lot more in general. So it's just the risk reward factor, really. Like, just kind of keep that in mind a bit more when we're deciding on what to do. I think those are probably the main points for the first game. Also, I would say buy USS earlier. You bought a different enchant, even if you did end up going that enchant, I'd still say buy it earlier. Typically after third item, if we are ahead, which you were quite ahead. And in that game specifically, QSS or Edge of Night, a lot of value, makes it a lot easier to survive. Going into the Ezreal game then, first thing is on Ezreal, play more around the passive in early game. You know how the passive works, right? Just making sure.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, play more around the passive in the early game. Spam Q less often on champs. Instead, use Q to push wave and poke once we have control of the wave. Now be careful to not spam your first ability too much on the wave, because that is something that's a little dangerous. I mean, you're not really planning probably on playing Ezreal based on what we talked about anyways that much, so we don't need to talk a ton about specifics, but it's not bad to keep this thing in mind, because it is important when you're laning in Ezreal to pay attention to his passive, because then you kind of understand when you can and can't trade with him and stuff like that. And then this is probably the main thing that I want you keeping track of when you're playing auto-attacking champions, because this is way more important on a champion like Sivir, or any auto-attacking champion, especially because you have a spell shield. So like, and it's kind of what we mentioned before, but I'm gonna write it to kind of like reiterate the point, and that's keep track of key abilities before going forward, and keep in mind how you can respond to them. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say one of the key abilities we identify is Ahri going on and charming you. Well, if you're playing Sivir, you know you have a button that stops that charm, right? Like your Edge of Night or your spell shield thing. And so like understanding how you can respond is the next part of just keeping track of key abilities. Like, you don't always have to wait for a Zedel to be out, because you might have stasis, or you might have Iceborne Gauntlet, like we were saying, or you could even just have your flash up to flash the damage after you have so many ways to respond. And so you keep track of the key things. I'm going to respond in this way, and then everything else is reactive, right? Like, you're not going to realistically know how the fight's actually going to play out. So maybe it turns out that the fourth most dangerous thing on the enemy team ends up threatening you, and in that case then you have to start being reactive, because you probably weren't keeping that part in mind. But it's just like, you keep the key things in mind, but you don't overwhelm yourself with like everything that you're keeping track of, and then that's probably going to be the best way to play the fights overall. Also, just in general, and again, this is not really, I didn't really watch you play any lethal tempo champions, but just early on in the fight as a lethal tempo champion, I can't type, lethal tempo champ, your main goal is to stack lethal on the front line. And so again, what we said your job is early on, as Ezreal, as Varus, is to poke, and then as the fight develops, you're more aggressive. Well, your job as a lethal tempo champ is more so hit the front line to get your lethal tempo stacked, and then you're more aggressive, as the fight breaks out and everything. So that's just something to keep in mind. Again, maybe you already knew that, but like, that's definitely kind of your important job in the early parts of the fight. Overall, I think you do good in the lane in terms of keeping track of like controlling the wave, especially on Varus. You did a really good job of like having the lane push and kind of, playing around your level advantages. And I can tell like you have a decent like fundamental understanding of that type of stuff. I think overall your lane phase is good. Like, you kind of got griefed in the Ezreal game, so it's a bit hard. I think these are the main things though. If you have additional questions or anything we mentioned that I didn't like talk about, just let me know.
I have like a couple that come to mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of them is in Varus. When should I look like the ultimate? Obviously, it's a good engage tool, but is it better to use it as a follow-up? Is it better to use it as the engage of a fight, or is it just a situational thing when you have to make the decision when fights are breaking out and things are coming?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, situational, but I'll describe some of the main situations. So the first thing is Varus ult usage, defensive as a response to something. So like the reason I'm just saying something is because, so again, a certain danger that we might identify might be Volibear, as, you know, let's say that he's the most scary champion on the enemy team based on what we decide. Well, your ultimate can obviously stop him. So like any champion who's very kiteable, it's nice to have your ultimate as a defensive option to like start the fight. Now let's say there's a different situation where like there is a key starting a fight on a key target. So like let's say someone's really fed on the enemy team, and you know if that person dies, you just win the game. Well then, if you see an angle to ult flash onto them or whatever, you can, you know, do that obviously, right? And if you're able to kill them right away, that's going to be really good. And then just also follow up on team CC, and that's probably like the easiest way to use it. So whenever your team CCs, you just use it, you know, to follow up. It's going to be pretty straightforward. Overall, and again, like these are, you know, specific uses, situations you can use it. I would say the typical way that I'm most often using it is when a front line just shows up in front of me, you know, because usually the front line is the easiest one to hit. I usually am just going to hit the front line with it, because then it's going to spread to other people and it's going to make just the fight awkward. And I'm going to get stacks onto people, and then their front line is going to be half health, because if you ult the front line and then you WQ them, they're pretty much already half health. And that also gives you time to kind of auto them, so you can use your third ability, play around that, stacks and everything. So I would say just most often usage is just hitting a front line and hoping it spreads, basically. So like typically, you know, if it's only the front line, don't just ult them right away. Wait for, you know, the teammates to get closer so it'll spread. Does that make sense, or do you still have questions about the ult?
Yeah, that would just answer all my questions right there.
Okay, cool. Any other questions?
Yeah, another thing I just was thinking about was the boots enchant. Usually you would want to go QSS, right? There's situations where you should go stasis, especially for example if they have Zed or like Fizz or something like, or an assassin. But usually you would go for QSS, right?
It's pretty. I'd say I do stasis more than QSS. Honestly, I
Okay.
mean, like stasis as default and into obvious choices. Like, I think you know when I say obvious, like Zed, Fizz,
Yeah,
Lee
yeah,
that
yeah.
type of thing. And then for me, QSS is whenever they have, whenever basically, I can't say, whenever the key abilities identified are crowd control. So it's like, it's pretty much as straightforward as when you're going through that thought process that we're, again, and I think you can do this usually before the game starts, and then also as the game progresses, because obviously you kind of got to look at the scoreboard to see who's actually strong, because that changes who matters. But like, if the things you identify are, you know, Zed and Fizz, which those are the obvious ones, but it could also be things like Talon, it could be pretty much any
Cali,
burst
yeah.
assassin, right? If that's what you identify, well then stasis is the choice, right? But if the things you identify are, we can just look at the game you played, Ashe, Ari, Volibear, all those things stun you, then those are all the key abilities. So if all the key abilities stun you, it's QSS. If all the key abilities are just a bunch of burst damage, it's probably stasis. And then every once in a while, I go proto belt if the enemy are really easy to kite. So like, if they're, let's say, Olaf, who's probably the hardest counter to Varus in the game, or at least one of them,
Yeah.
Mundo, and then there's just no like really dangerous, like there's no Zed, there's no, you know, like there's just no super dangerous thing, and then there's those certain champions who are really easy to kite, then maybe you go proto belt. Pretty rare, but it's nice because then you can proto belt forward and ult as well, but like that's a really rare thing, and pretty much those are the only enchants that I'm ever going.
Yeah.
Maybe if you want to do that one you went maybe into Katarina, possibly, but even into Katarina, I just prefer stasis because it's usually universally better. Like it's better against the other champions most of the time, and it still does a similar thing for me. But yeah,
Yeah, that'll be it. Oh yeah, yeah. One last thing.
yep,
I was thinking about I was thinking about the various runes and the similar spells. The runes, obviously, I heard you on stream where you said that if you're gonna play lethal tempo, just don't go Varus. I mean, there's champions that
yeah.
make a
Or
lot
you
better use of it.
Sivir, for example, the one note, yeah, like any,
Yeah,
but yeah.
obviously. Yeah, and so first strike would be always optimal, right?
Yeah, I mean, some
Especially
people
with
when
that.
they play the poke build, they prefer Comet because it's slightly better in lane, but to me, the like strength in lane is not more than the gold you get and the burst damage you get from first strike. I would always go first strike, but if you like really like Comet, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't like Comet. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm a first strike believer.
that's good.
So and on the summoner spells, I find a lot of success going Ghost in a lot of games with Varus Ghost Flash.
Yeah.
I mean, is that something that's like, is it bad or is it actually?
I mean, there's a lot of people who like go Ghost a lot more than I go Ghost on like any ADCs. To me, it's completely pointless and really dumb to go it with this build because your build is based around long range poking and kind of like being sort of in a mobile like high damage champion. It's not based around you trying to kite people in fights really hard and auto attack a bunch. Like the value I get from Ghost is that I get to auto attack a lot more because I'm able to like, walk around and kind of be a lot quicker. And I don't really need to auto attack more because my damage on the squishies is going to one shot them if I land an ult on them, or I'm not going to be in range to like auto them, so I'm just going to be poking them. Or I'm going to be autoing tanks who are usually pretty easy to auto anyways. I don't really need the ghost. And like then I don't have exhaust for any assassin and I don't have cleanse or like, if they have a bunch of CC. So for me it's almost always either exhaust or cleanse, whichever defensive thing just gets more value, which is actually kind of like pretty much in a game where you would go QSS, you'd probably go cleanse. So a game where you'd go stasis, you'd probably go exhaust most of the time. If you really prefer ghost, I don't think it's so bad that like it's troll, but I do think it's pretty counterintuitive to the champion strength overall.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. But I mean, on Sivir, it's pretty decent,
Yeah, yeah. On
honestly.
Sivir, I mean, on Sivir, it's probably one of the best champions to go it on because you are you are immobile. I mean, you have like some, from your ult, but like you're pretty immobile, and you already have a spell shield, which is not exactly the same as a QSS or cleanse, but it's kind of similar in a way. So for me, Ghost on Sivir is quite often the best choice. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that'll be it, man. Really,
Okay.
really appreciate it. I mean, thank you so much, and looking forward to another session.
Yeah, of course. All right. I'll see you later then. Good luck.